Hi, my name's Joe Conway. I'm from the old garage, and I'm going to show you today a very quick and easy way to splice wires. The way we're going to do this is we're going to solder the wires together. And there's lots of different ways to splice wires, but this is a very fast and efficient way to do it, and a very permanent way to get it done. Um, what I have set up here on my bench is everything I need to splice the wire. So I have two wires here. I'm going to splice them together. I'm going to join them. First thing I have to do is strip the ends. So I'm going to strip, I'm going to say, about a ½ inch off of both ends. Right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the proper size heat shrink tubing and place that over the end. It's very important that I do that now because I'm not going to be able to do it later. Then I take the two wires and I'm going to twist them together. What I usually do is I make an X and then I just twist them together. Right? The better you twist them together, the better your joint's going to be. And I have this neat little holder here that holds the wires together, but you don't really need that. It just makes it easier. So in order to solder, I need soldering iron. I need solder. This is my Power Pro butane soldering iron, right? I got to light it. It's going to get hot. And I'm going to let the soldering iron get hot for a while because I want it to be able to melt the solder, right? One thing we want to avoid is what they call a cold solder joint. If you look at the end of the soldering iron, there's a little glob of solder on there. What I'm waiting for is I'm waiting for that to melt. Right, there you go. Look at it now, it's melted. See a little smoke coming off it. Now I'm going to heat my wires. I'm going to allow the wires to heat the solder. I'm not going to take the solder and touch it to the soldering iron and melt it that way because that's not going to heat the wires up and the solder's not going to flow into the wires. So I'm going to heat the wires, get the wires hot, not too hot, right, until the wires are hot enough to melt my solder. And it takes a little bit of patience to do this, right? I just hold the soldering iron next to the wires as they get hot. Right, and I want to check it periodically to see if it's getting hot or not. There it goes. If you look, you see the solder started to flow. I'm going to melt the solder now. And this is rosin core solder, right? This is specially made for soldering wires. And I only want to use enough solder that it solders my joint. I don't want to flood it with solder. That'll make a stiff section in the wire, which will cause the wire to break. Once the solder melts and it flows through the wire, I'm going to take the heat away. I'm going to turn off my soldering iron, place that on the side. Now I have to wait for that joint to cool, right? Before I put my heat shrink on it, because if I don't, the heat shrink will shrink when it touches the solder. So I'm going to remove my tip from my soldering iron, which is very hot. And I'm going to place this little shield on it. This shield is going to allow me to melt or not melt rather, but heat shrink the heat shrink tubing. So my wire should be cool enough now that I can put the heat shrink tubing on it. I'm going to take it out of my little clamp here. And again, I have the heat shrink tubing on there. I'm going to slide it over the connection. Right? And this is the trick. You want to make sure that your heat shrink tubing is big enough to fit over the connector, and I have a selection of it there. Right now I've slid it over so that the splice is in the middle of the heat shrink tubing. Again, I'm going to light my torch here, and I'm going to shrink the heat shrink tubing. That little shield allows me to heat both sides of the heat shrink at the same time, but I'm also going to turn it, right, and I'm going to shrink the heat shrink tubing onto the wire. Alright, now that didn't come out quite perfect. I wasn't exactly in the middle, but now I have shrunk the heat shrink and I have a good solder joint. One of the things I want to point out with heat shrink tubing is it comes in a number of different kinds. This is the inexpensive heat shrink tubing, and if I can get my camera to focus there, you'll notice around the end here there's nothing coming out. That's because this is single wall heat shrink tubing and it doesn't have the adhesive in it that it should have. This is the better heat shrink tubing. This has an adhesive in it that's going to adhere it to the wire and make it waterproof. And again, I'm going to shrink the heat shrink tubing. Notice how it shrinks all along. Be careful not to overheat it. Alright. Make sure it's melted all along. And I'm going to turn it off. Now if you look, I get the camera to focus, you'll notice that the adhesive has come out the ends of the heat shrink tubing. That tells you that the tubing is sealed now and that you have a waterproof splice. And that's it. That's how long it takes. That's how simple it is to connect two wires to make a splice. And you have a permanent splice that you don't have to worry about it failing or it being electrically bad. You have a good splice that's going to last for years and years and years, basically a permanent repair. Thank you, and again, this is Joe from the Old Garage, and we'll have more videos later.